So this morning we have a guest speaker, and I'm very pleased to welcome the award-winning author Sophia Bennett. Sophia is a British children's writer and author of several novels for young adults, and her new book, The Windsor Knot, is a clever crime series in which Queen Elizabeth II secretly solves crimes while carrying out her royal duties. So good morning, Sophia, and I'm going to hand over to you.
Hello. Thank you very much. Well, I'm so honoured to be here and to be talking to you all today. It's strange to be doing it from my dining room with my kids' pictures on the wall behind me and not in person. But anyway, hello. The reason that I love talking to schools is because I knew from quite early on that I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't meet anyone who did that kind of thing and find out how they did it for years and years. And I wasn't really sure whether there was a secret to becoming somebody who worked in the artistic world. And so I like the chance to talk about what I do with you guys so that you can perhaps decide whether that's the kind of thing you would like to do too, or the kind of thing you would absolutely hate to do. And I have a list of questions here that you have sent, some of you, so thank you very much for that. And I'm basically going to go through a lot of your questions, which will answer a lot of the things that I get asked when I go into schools. But before that, you probably have no idea who I am. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about some of the books that I've written to give you a sense of what I've done. So they're behind me now. This is the latest one, The Windsor Knot, which I'll talk about in a second. And this, by the way, is my latest notebook. I always have a notebook with me wherever I go, so that when I get ideas for scenes, plots, whatever it's going to be, I can write them down. I often don't ever need to read them again. It's quite interesting. Once they're in my notebook, then they're kind of in my head. But if I don't write them down, then they tend to get lost. So I don't really know any writers that don't have one of these in some form that they take with them. But here we go. These are the books that I wanted to show you. So if I show you like that, I've written 11 books that have been published now, and on top of that, 4 that never were. So I spent 10 years trying to get published before I actually got a contract, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. But the first one was called Threads, and it became a series of 3. And it's about 3 girls growing up in London who meet a refugee from Uganda who is a secret fashion designer, and they go on to sort of help her realize her dream, and she's incredibly talented, so she helps them as well. Then there's The Castle, which is my spy story. That's one of the other Beads books. There's The Look, which is probably my most successful book in the UK until my latest one. I like this one because it's got pink page edges. And this is about a girl who gets scouted to become a model. And meanwhile, her sister is very ill and having chemotherapy and things. And it's about how they help each other out. You Don't Know Me is my cyberbullying book. And then Love Song was another successful book that came out in 2016, I think it was. And this one features a long scene about Led Zeppelin. So it was really lovely to hear that music just now. But in the second half of this one, this is about a girl and a boy band. And it was inspired by Harry Styles and One Direction back in the day when they were a thing. And I had a feeling at the time that they would break up because their life on tour was just so constantly stressful. I couldn't see how they could put up with that much longer. And so I imagined a girl in a house with a band who were fighting with each other, and it was all kind of falling apart. And there's a scene where she's in a sitting room in this massive house in the middle of the night, and Kashmir by Led Zeppelin comes on. And if you listen to it on Spotify or something later, you'll hear it's a really famous, recognizable tune, but she's never heard it before. And it really moves her and it does something to her. And then the bad boy of the band comes down and they listen to it together. So always happy to listen to Led Zeppelin. Actually, it was inspired by a scene where I was listening to it with my son, who was about 6 at the time. So it was a very different kind of scene. But nevertheless, we were both in the semi-darkness, just listening to this incredible music and looking at each other and going, wow, that's amazing. So as I say, there were 10 books that I wrote for teenagers, and then I changed direction, and my new one is The Windsor Knot, and in it the Queen solves crimes because she's got some time on her hands. Why wouldn't she? And I was thinking about her about 3 years ago now, just thinking about The Crown, and then realizing that I felt that I knew her really well because my father was in the army, and he met her a few times. And I was thinking about what an expert she is in various fields, and she's got a fantastically good memory, and how interesting it must be kind of always seeing things from a different perspective from everybody else, because everybody is always looking at you if you're her, and you're always looking the other way, and she must spot things that nobody else sees. And I thought that would make her a fantastic detective. So I had this idea, and it took me a year to work out how I wanted to write it. And I gave her a sidekick who's called Rosie Ashodi, who has a job that I interviewed for actually in the 1990s and didn't get, the assistant private secretary. And Rosie is a British Nigerian ex-army officer who helps the Queen by going off and kind of doing all the legwork that the Queen can't do. And there is a very suspicious death at Windsor Castle, and the Queen solves the crime. And this book has kind of taken my career to a new level. It did well with Threads, the first one about the fashion designer girls, and a couple of the others, as I say, were quite successful. But this one has sold to America, so it will be coming out there in a couple of months. And it came out here just before Christmas. And I actually only got the deals at the beginning of the first lockdown, so the whole thing has happened during the pandemic. And yeah, it'll be coming out in about sort of 17 other countries this year. And that's kind of, that's just the writer's dream come true. So in a way, for me now, that's the end of the story, but all your questions here will help me describe how I got there, I hope. Luckily, I can see the clock on the wall behind me, so, so I will try not to overrun. But there are, as I say, there are 41 questions on this sheet. I'm not going to answer them all. I'm going to answer about 10 of them. But they showed me how interested a lot of people are on what do you do, why do you do it, how do you do it? And so that's what I'm going to try and explain as we go. So Rowan said, who or what inspired you to become an author? And that is probably the question that I get asked the most. And I have to say, ask any author and you'll get a different answer. So this is just really, really personal to me. When I was 7, my father, as I say, was in the army, and he was living in the south of England, and I was going to school there, and I was really happy, and I had a really tight friendship group, and we just got on, and it was all great. And then I heard he'd been posted abroad to this place called Hong Kong that I had never heard of. And my headmistress, I remember, took me into her office and showed it to me on a globe. And it was literally on the other side of the world. And I was just devastated. I was going to have to leave my grannies behind, and my cat behind, and my aunties. And it was just, and all my friends. And it was really hard. And we went out to Hong Kong, and we lived on the side of a mountain, a misty mountain. And I went to a really, really big school where obviously I didn't know anyone to start with, and it was hard. And my mother was always really good at just making there be books around for me to read. And she didn't mind what I read. I could read something that was too old for me, something that was too young for me, anything. And we would go to the library whenever it came round, which was once a fortnight or something. And the library was a little like converted ice cream van that would come around all the mountain villages. And would just take up piles of books. And I read Enid Blyton's Secret 7 books, and I read Noel Streatfeild books, and all the classic books that were around in the 1970s. And I kind of lost myself in those stories. And I decided really early on that's what I'd like to do too. And then I started really enjoying myself in this new school, and we went on a big school trip. It was the first time that we'd gone and stayed away from home. And it's like a big camping trip to an island off Hong Kong. And we had to write a daily diary, which everybody hated. And I decided to do mine in rhyme because I was a bit mad. And so I did. So I wrote this kind of rhyming poetry diary thing every day, and I would read it out. And to my amazement, instead of sort of teasing me and bullying me for doing this weird thing, everybody quite liked it and they looked forward to it and they enjoyed it. And I don't know, you know that feeling if you try something that you secretly like, and to your surprise, people enjoy what you do, you want to do more of it. So I had other ideas for what I wanted to do growing up. I wanted to be an airline hostess, but I wasn't going to be tall enough at the time. And I wanted to be an Olympic gymnast, but I still can't do a handstand. But I could write. And I know many people who've come to writing really late in their lives, and they've got good at it later on. But it was kind of always my thing. So who inspired me to be an author? Kind of, I would say, above anything, it was my mother, just leaving all these books lying around the house, that throughout my childhood, I could just pick up any book and read it. And we still talk about books, and she's still always read way more than I have. And so she's still my inspiration in many ways. And she's a really good storyteller as well. Number 2 was from Mimi. If I went to university, what course did I take? I did go to university. I really, really wanted, my dream, my plan was to go to Oxford University and study English, because that's what writers did. So I applied to Oxford to read English and I didn't get in. So I applied again the next year and I still didn't get in. And I didn't get into any universities to read English. And in the end, I went to London University and read French and Italian instead, because they had a new course opening up. And I absolutely loved it. So I read all the books I would have read if I'd read English, plus a whole bunch of French and Italian books. And it taught me a lesson that stayed with me for the rest of my life, which is it's not kind of what happens, it's what you do about it that really matters. So there will definitely be times in all our lives where things don't go the way we deserve and plan and hope and expect. And it can be the start of something, not the end of something. So I'm really glad I did French and Italian now, and I'm really glad I went to that school in Hong Kong, but it didn't seem like a good idea at the time. Next one from Isabella. How did you start in the writing industry and get your first book published? I was so desperate to be a writer that I didn't dare actually write a book, in case it was terrible, in case somebody said, you can't do it. And that would just be too crushing. So for many years, I didn't. I did other jobs. I worked with the European Union. I went out to Brussels. I did that. And I was a management consultant, and I applied for this job working for the Queen. And after about 10 years, Harry Potter came out, and that inspired me to try and write. So I wrote a book and it didn't get published. And I did that for 10 years. And then after 10 years of really trying, I applied to a competition called the Times Chicken House Children's Fiction Competition with a book called Threads. And the prize was a £10,000 publishing contract. And to my astonishment, after 10 years of nothing, I won. And I got the contract, and the books became a series. And ultimately, I wrote 7 books for that publisher and 3 others for other children's publishers, and now a whole series for adult publishers. So that competition is what started me. And I love competitions because they give you a deadline and people will look at your work, and you kind of have nothing to lose, really. So what was the next one? Ellie. How did you come up for the idea of your best-selling book? Well, various ones have done really well, but I've talked about the Harry Styles One Direction one, that became Love Song. But with this one, with Windsor Knot, which is the one that will be my best-selling book, I'm pretty sure, that was driving along in the car one day, thinking about The Crown, and then just suddenly picturing the Queen as a detective. And I knew already that I wanted to write a detective story, but I couldn't find what they call a hook. When you kind of need this in the writing world, you need something that makes it easy for you to describe what you're doing to other people, so they will talk about it too. And The Queen Solves Crimes is just a really easy way of hooking people into the idea. So in this book, a Russian pianist dies at Windsor Castle, and MI5 think it's one of the Queen's servants, and she doesn't agree with them. And she remembers a tiny, tiny detail from the night that he died that nobody else saw. And to start with, she can't remember quite what the detail is. She knows there's something, then she does remember it and she can't see how it fits. And then she has to kind of piece it all together. And meanwhile, she's celebrating her 90th birthday. There's a huge pageant for her. Kylie Minogue comes to sing and stays at the castle. So I had lots of fun putting all of that stuff in as well. So yeah, what I find with book ideas is they just come to me, and then some stick and some don't stick. Benjamin asks me, if you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be? And I really wish that I could go back to my younger writing self, because my younger writing self was passionate about writing, but really scared about sharing. And I would say, don't be too self-critical. Just write. Keep writing, finish things off, have completed things. I'm sure some of you will have read Neil Gaiman books and seen Good Omens on TV and that kind of thing. And I love Neil Gaiman's writing tips. They're amazing. And one of his favorite ones, mine too, is finish things. So if you are a writer of any sort, having a completed poem or rap lyric or film script or whatever it is you're working on is really different to having lots of things that you've just started. Learning the art of creating a completed thing and writing those closing sentences or lines is really important. So I would say do that, and then just take risks, do it a lot, do it for free, share things, try things out, because every time you write you get better. And I mean, everybody always says read, but I was doing that anyway. But I would say, yeah, just take risks, write that book, try it out. It doesn't actually matter if everyone says it's terrible. That's what I learned in the end. Just write another one. 5, Artin, I love this one. Does writing energize or exhaust you? Such a good question. And if you're deciding what you want to do in life, I'm sure that's something that you'll think about. I mean, I really love the sound of the ex-student who's gone on to be a choral expert at uni. I mean, wow, that sounds amazing and important. And I bet and I hope that he is energized by saving choral. Both, I would say. So there are days like yesterday when I'm really energized because I'm working through a plot and I'm really excited about how it's all fitting together like a jigsaw puzzle. And I'm excited about imagining the reader putting that puzzle together in their own head. And there are days when it's absolutely exhausting because it's just not flowing the way that I need it to flow. And what I've learned is you just have to work through those exhausting days. And live for the energizing ones, and then readers will get back to you and you know, if you're lucky, and say how much they've enjoyed what you're doing, and I really love that. So that's hugely energizing. One of the most energizing things of all is when the box comes about a month before your book is due to be published, and it's got physical copies in, and you haven't seen them before until they arrive. And to have something that started as a completely blank Word document on my screen become this with, I mean, this particular one they've done really beautifully. So it's got these end pages with the Queen on and some hidden corgis there. I don't know if you can see there are 2 corgis in that. Yeah, it's really special. So that's very energizing. Number 6, Ibtisam, I hope I said that right. When did you realize that you could make it as an author? Well, I have had a rolling contract with my husband, nothing written, just an agreement between us, that if it stops working, I'll do a proper job. And that's been going for 11 years since Threads was published. And there have been times when it's been really hard. And I've been thinking, yep, I mean, I've done lots of teaching work, which I've really enjoyed, but other things to bring in money because the writing wasn't doing that. So that when I was really sure that I could just keep doing this was probably this year, and I am 54, so it's a fairly precarious profession. It's taken me till now. You have to do it for the love of it, really, if you're going to be a writer. How long does it usually take you to write a book? This is Kinga. Great question, love it. Shortest amount of time, 5 weeks. Funnily enough, that book didn't get published. Longest amount of time, 2 years, really. That was Love Song, the one about the band, and it just wouldn't write itself and wouldn't write itself. And that was when it was exhausting every day. I knew what I wanted to say, but it just wouldn't work. And then one day it all sort of began to come together. And that book ended up winning the Romantic Novel of the Year award in 2017. So the fact that it was hard to write didn't mean it was a bad book. It just meant that it took a lot of effort. But normally, I would say it takes me about 6 months to write a book, but then another couple of months to keep editing it. And I know that one of the questions is, how many edits do I do? And the threads, I did 34. So 34 times of really, really going over it and rethinking it. And I'd say the average now is about 4 or 5. Real take it apart, put it back together again, think about every single word in it kind of edits. That's what makes the kind of books that get published, is they're never good enough first time, ever. Even the best writers that you read will not produce something that is publishable first time. What they will do is go over it and over it, usually with their editor, to get it as good as it can be. Right, I think I've got time for one more question. Oh, I quite like this one from Kriti. How do you stay productive while writing books and not get distracted? Okay, so I do get distracted. I get really distracted, particularly at the moment with everything that's going on in the world. I think everybody does. So the way that I keep working is I have a simple piece of paper and I write how many 1,000 words I want to do each week. And it's a really simple tool, but it really keeps me going because I can tick off the 1,000 words that I've written and feel like I'm making progress. So yeah, that plus it helps to have writing friends out there who kind of say, how are you doing? And we share how we're getting on. So I'd say piece of paper and friendship is the answer. There are a couple of questions here that I haven't managed to answer, but I will say I have 2 websites now. So I have sophiabennett.com, which is the website about all my teen books that I was talking about. And I have sjbennettbooks.com, which is about the Queen series, about this one. And if there are any questions that you would like to ask me that I haven't answered yet, or anything you'd like to tell me, you can contact me through either of those websites. And I'm the person who reads. I don't have a team of secretaries or anything. I'm the person that reads the emails. And I'm always happy to answer. And if you say that you're from here, then I can remember what I said roughly. And I'm always happy to follow up. So with that, I would just say, I know some of you are writers and some of you will be writing now. Very, very good luck with all of what you're doing. And if you're not a writer, that is completely fine. But I would say that one of the greatest things that I found in lockdown is books, because books are such an escape, particularly now. Through a book, you really can go anywhere you want in the world and do anything you want to do. So I highly recommend a book. And I think, Dr. Pickles, I will leave it there.
Sophia, thank you very much. That was a fascinating insight into your life and work as an author. I think there's a really important message there in that you talked about having a dream and having something that you wanted, but also having a journey where the dream didn't quite go the way you wanted, but you stuck at it and you found a way. I think that's a hugely important lesson for life there. So thank you so much for your time. Everybody listening, I hope you enjoyed that and have a super day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.